up your engine!
Do you ever wonder how they get those gas mileage ratings and why they're often way off from what you actually get? Well, here's the truth. 85% of those ratings are given by the manufacturer to the government. There is a testing facility in Michigan that the EPA runs. Out of the 17,000 employees on the EPA, 18 of them work at this testing facility. And at max, they can test only 15% of the vehicles every year. They can do 2 to 250 vehicles. And yes, they're tested on dynamometers. I've been there. I've seen how it works. It's not driving cars in the real world. It's done on a dyno. Now, all this theoretical crap that, oh, well, they can compensate for the wind, friction, by adding more resistance to the rollers on the dyno. A dyno's just a machine that measures the drive on them. I believe they have one four-wheel dyno there, because if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, you'd have to test it. Before that, they tested the four-wheel on a two-wheel by disconnecting drive shafts and then doing more computer stuff. And if you know, when people start doing things with computers, often it's a load of baloney, garbage in, garbage out, right? Now you know the reason why the ratings are often a lot higher than what you actually get. One, only 15% of them are done by the EPA. The other 85% are done by the manufacturers, the guys that are trying to sell you these cars. Great gas mileage. Now, if you noticed, a lot of the stickers had things like, you may get up to this gas mileage. They don't say that's what you're actually going to get. I mean, I've tested it was rated at 27 on the highway, and I got 20 and a half miles per gallon going on the highway at highway speeds only. So, I mean, there's no BS on that. I drove it on the highway for 3 hours and saw here's the mileage that it got. So you can take all this theoretical physics and put them on dynos. It's not the same as driving them in every world situations. That's why the ratings are often far off. It's yet another fantasy in our society that here's real scientific facts. No, they aren't. They're done in a laboratory, not the real world. So don't be surprised you get a car and you get a lot worse than the ratings on the machine, because the machine is a machine under controlled situations with professional drivers. I've been there. I've watched the guys test it. They actually don't even do miles per gallon per se, miles per gallon. They don't go miles. They analyze the exhaust coming out and then figure here's the thermal efficiency that this machine is doing, and that will relate to so many miles per gallon. So it's in such a stratospherical scientific situation. They're usually not all that accurate. At least now you know how they come up with these ridiculous figures. David 916 says, Scotty, I noticed my tires cracking a little bit. They're Goodyear Eagles and they're 2015. Okay, so they're 5 years old. I want to know how much longer I can drive them on the street, not at highway speeds. Probably quite some time. If you're not losing any air and they're not out around and they go smooth. I've had cars sometimes 5-6 years I'm driving that way because we fly everywhere. We don't take car trips hardly anywhere. The car trips we take are after we fly in our rental cars that have tires that aren't that old because they're rental cars. You're right about highway speeds though. When I was a kid, we used to go to Montreal to watch the Montreal Expos. In Montreal, there is this kind of highway that goes through the middle of the city where the speed limit was high. And you would see more Quebecois people with flat tires on the side of that highway because they had all these junky old tires. And if they were going 30 in town, no problem. But when they got on that 60-mile-an-hour highway, they kept blowing up the tires. So you're right there. If you stick to just in town and you're not losing any air pressure and it steers okay, often you can go a really long time. I mean, I've gone years and years that way. Just don't really go on the highway. I got the other day, I told him, I said, whatever you do, don't go on the highway. So what did the guy do? He go on the highway and a tire blew up. If you stick to your guns, you can probably drive it quite some time. Slow BTO says, Scotty, what are your thoughts on a Mustang with a 3800 engine? I'm 17 and found a manual for $2,000 to 95. Asking about the reliability of the engines if parts are expensive. Thanks. Well, those V6 engines have less horsepower, but a lot of times that's a plus because a lot of guys buy Mustangs and they drive them like maniacs with a big V8 engine doing burnouts all the time. It generally turns out that the people that buy the V6 don't drive them as fast because if they were really fast, they'd buy the V8. That's an old vehicle. Do have a mechanic check it out to make sure there's nothing wrong. But if it runs good and it still drives good, it's a standard transmission. You don't have to worry about the automatic transmission, which is the weakest thing of those V6s. It could be a fun car. Now, the guy's asking $2,000, so like I say, have a mechanic check it out. It might be absolutely falling apart if that's all he's asking for. In that case, don't buy it. But If he says it's in good shape, go ahead. You can always get parts for those things. It's a Ford. It's not hard to get parts for. John Wakey says, Sir Scotty, I want to buy a car in Japan by auction. Is that good? Well, I am never a fan of buying cars at auction. Now, you're saying you're going to buy it in Japan. I have no idea how the Japanese auctions work. Maybe they're different than the American auction. Because I guess in Japan, they see it as kind of a shame thing to sell used things. A lot of times they give used things away. So maybe there's some good used cars. I don't know. Here in the United States, it's almost always a mistake unless you're a professional seller. Because the reason the car's at an auction is it was a good car, it would sell on its own. People are always looking for good used cars. It's at an auction, it's almost always got some kind of serious problem. And generally, they don't let you road test it beforehand. In the United States, I'd say stay far away from auctions unless you're a pro and you really know what you're doing. And even then, you're doing some gambling. But I don't know what it's like in Japan. I'll have to ask the next time I talk to a Japanese friend of mine and see what he knows, if he knows anything about auto auctions in Japan. Maybe they're different in the United States. Maybe that's just how people sell their cars because they see it as shameful as trying to sell a used thing, so they give it to somebody else to do. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out. Katabi says, Scotty, do you work by the job or by the hour? Well, generally I work by the job. I mean, if I work by the hour, then I'd be motivated to work slower to make more money. Come on, let's use common sense. The only time I charge by the hour is when it's some oddball thing. Like if somebody has an electrical short, I'd just say, look, I have to charge you by the hour because I have no idea where it is, and I just got to keep working and checking and searching and seeing where the problem is. So the analysis will be by the hour. Once you figure it out, then you can tell them what it's going to cost. Like if it takes you 3 hours to find out it's the computer that's bad, then you have to say, okay, you'll owe me this amount of money. Then you say, well, here's what it's going to cost to replace the computer. And then I go by the job because it's stupid to charge people by the hour. You would just work slower. You know, it's just common sense. But if you're trying to figure something out, you more or less have to because you have no idea. Or you give the people the option to say, okay, you want me to analyze this. How long do you want me to analyze it? You just say, you want me to analyze it for a couple hours? You say, well, it's a couple $100. And then you go from there. Lulu4532 says, I really need a good daily driver. My neighbor's selling me his 2000 Pontiac GT supercharged for $1,000 with 93,000 miles, and he said something's wrong with the power steering and it needs brakes. Is it worth putting money into? I am not a Pontiac fan, and that's supercharged, so it has an awful lot of power. But if it runs and shifts, take it to a mechanic. Have it checked. And if he says, yeah, it's in decent shape, $1,000 is nothing for a car these days, but you do want the guy to check it out. Let's say the supercharger is going out. Then you're going to have to spend thousands of dollars fixing that, and it's not worth fixing. And if you do buy it, realize one thing, it's supercharged. That's a lot of strain on the engine. Don't drive it like a maniac, because if you start doing burnouts, you'll burn the engine and transmission out rather quickly. But if you baby it, it can be perfectly fine. And $1,000 today, that's nothing for a car if it runs and shifts good still. Mr. 4-Speed says, '05 Ford Focus. It slips in fourth gear and it's an automatic. Could it be a solenoid? No, not really. If the solenoid's bad, it doesn't slip in gear. It won't go into that gear or it won't shift to the next gear. Those Focuses had horrendous automatic transmissions. And if it's slipping in fourth gear, it means it's starting to go out 99.9% of the time. I mean, if you baby it and it goes okay, keep driving it because, what, it's a 15-year-old Focus. It's worth absolutely nothing. Now, Ford's buying back some of those. You might take it to them and see if they'll buy it back. But, of course, they're not going to give you much. I had a customer that he took one in there and they offered him $1,000 for the car. So he might as well just keep driving as long as it runs. Then when it finally goes out, send it to the junkyard where it belongs and never buy another one. Well, they're not going to be making Focuses anyway, so you can't buy any new ones. Probably a good thing, too. 19 Crosslug says, Scotty, I got a 2019 Subaru Crosstrek with a 6-speed manual. I was wondering if oil catch can or air oil separator would be a good idea to prevent carbon buildup on this engine, because it's GDI. You don't really have to in a Subaru. I don't see any problems with the buildup in Subaru. Their engineers obviously did a heck of a lot better job than Volkswagen did. I've seen Volkswagens that the carbon buildup was so much inside the intake valves that you had to get a sandblaster. You don't use sand. You'd put walnut shells instead because they're softer, and you had to take it apart and blast all of that buildup on. I have never seen that on a Subaru. The Subarus, obviously, their engineers are doing a better job than Volkswagen did for the buildup, which of course occurs because now the GDI injectors spray the gas right inside the cylinder walls inside and not over the valves on the intake where the clean gasoline being sprayed actually cleans the valves. Gasoline is a very good solvent, but since it's not being sprayed on a GDI intakes, they can build up if their vent system is a poorly designed vent system. So far as I can see, Subaru's designed a much better one than Volkswagen did. I wouldn't bother on that vehicle putting that on. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.